Everybody's got a story. You just have to listen. Oh, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this is Good Listen. And one of the great things about being a podcaster is you get to learn about people and cultures and societies that you would never have met or heard about in 1,000 years unless you were doing a podcast. So a bunch of years back, I was doing this podcast where I learned about the Hacienda, which is a sex-positive community in Bushwick, Brooklyn. It's pretty wild. Like, they throw pretty extravagant parties that are quite adult. It's pretty cool. Like, the fact that something like this exists. But I always wondered, like, how does a place like this exist? Like, how do people pull this off? So I decided to invite Beth Sparksfire to the show today. She is one of the founders of the Hacienda, and she's got a great story to tell about how her community came together and what it's like to be the queen of Hacienda. Beth, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, Joe. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited you're here. And so I want to start this conversation by talking about how I found out about you. So many, many years ago, working on a podcast, I found about this place called the Hacienda. And as someone who's kind of lived a very basic bitch life, I had no idea what it was. And then all of a sudden, reading more and more about it, I was like, this place is real? So for the uninitiated, maybe folks who don't live in the New York City area, how would you describe what Hacienda is?
Hacienda is an organization, it's a community, it's a collective of people who share the same ideas around sex positive culture and values. And we put that into practice through events, parties, workshops, making friends with each other, having bonds. We have some houses where people live as well. So yeah, just coming together and like creating the strong community with these sex positive ideas about authenticity and getting rid of shame and endorsing and encouraging pleasure.
And you said houses. And so from what I understand, it's you guys are located in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and it's a series of townhouses. So first of all, how does someone acquire a series of houses in Brooklyn? Because I know you guys have been in Brooklyn for a while, but Bushwick has changed. It's become very expensive to live. It used to be the cool part of Brooklyn where like the hipsters and artists lived because it was cheap, and then all of a sudden everyone realized that's actually a pretty great place to live. So let's gentrify the whole thing. And then it get more expensive. So how long has it been there, and how were you able to develop this sort of community?
Yeah, great question. Bushwick is a really interesting and cool and ever changing neighborhood. And it's still like, I would say, the coolest spot in Brooklyn, even though it's been changing and developing over the years. So I've lived here for maybe 12 years, and my partner has lived here for even longer than that, 20 something years. He had the foresight to see that this was a great neighborhood and purchased some houses. So we have had a couple different houses throughout the years, mostly the Hacienda Villa, where between 11 and 15 people live. And we had another one recently that changed over to different long-term rentals. But yeah, the Hacienda Villa has been an amazing property for us. And it's been really great to have people living there long term who are sharing the same sorts of ideas about life and living and um, yeah, how they wanna go about their everyday life. And then we also host parties there too. So it takes a certain type of person to wanna live in this space. And it's been really awesome throughout the years. It's enabled us to have our own place to throw these events and really have like a secure home base, where we do the events and then where people also live.
And not that you guys would ever do this, but I mean, do you realize if you decided to sell, you and your partner would probably make a tiny little profit, wouldn't you?
We don't like to sell. We like to hold on to the good things so we can keep. I mean, really, like owning these properties and these buildings is what has enabled us throughout the years to have consistent events because oftentimes finding a venue is the hardest part about party producing. But owning these venues ourselves, it helps us to have a really secure base where we can, you know, keep this going for a long time, which is what we've been able to do.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned your partner's name's Andrew. Let's go into this interesting part of your life and the fact that you guys are not your again like the average couple. You're what known as a polyamorous couple. Could you take us back to how you two connected and how you developed this relationship?
Sure, yes. We are polyamorous. I met Andrew shortly after moving to New York, and I gotta say, it's been the best thing of my whole life. It's why I moved to New York is to meet him and start this new life of mine. Um, at my very first sexy party, which was a barbecue at his house, I met Andrew, and that is also the first day that I learned about polyamory, the very first sex party that I ever went to, and I met my future husband there and then ended up living in that house and having 2 children in that house and hosting many great parties in that house. We now live very nearby, but, I mean, sex parties in New York City and meeting Andrew changed my life. We've always been polyamorous from that first day, and it was always just, like, a really great fit for me. Even from the very start, it was, like, something that I didn't know I was looking for, but just really worked out perfectly. And then also I had the added benefit of he is an amazing partner and he's a little bit older than me. He had been married in the past, so he really knew what he wanted in a relationship and in life. And I guess he saw me and decided that was everything he wanted. So I always felt very loved and prioritized and secure in that relationship, which has, along with polyamory, allowed both of us to be our own independent selves while still having that, like, security and love of a primary partner. So it's been really wonderful. I have the best of all worlds and I couldn't be happier.
Wow, that's so cool. And you mentioned this barbecue that you were invited to. Please give us some context because it doesn't sound like your average party you get in, like someone in New York be like, "Hey, we got this little get together going on Saturday if you want to come by." So, how did you even get invited to this thing if you had no idea about this whole sex positive
I
culture?
mean, this is the sort of thing that can happen when you live in New York City, you know? This might be a normal sort of event to get invited to. I was working at a funny little company. It was like a bar mitzvah company. I just moved to the city. I was like hustling. Any job I could get, I would take. So I was working for this like bar mitzvah company and I worked with a guy who was just like, you know what? I think you're just going to like this sort of party and this sort of scene. And he told me, okay, it's like a sex party. But it was like a daytime barbecue. Okay, seems,
Sounds safe.
exciting. Yeah, exciting, but like approachable enough. And like he was right. Like I'm the sort of person who's like, especially just moving to New York, like, look, I'm up for anything. I'm here to have a good time. Like, let's go. So I invited my roommate and she makes so much fun of me to this day. It was a barbecue. I brought like deviled eggs. I was like, bring something. Well, I never really understood why that was funny. I guess I give you gas or something. Like, okay. So I brought my deviled eggs and I told her what kind of party it was. And we went and it was like, really fun, and, the shenanigans didn't even begin until, a while later, and she swears that she didn't even know what kind of party it was, and I'm like, "Yeah, I told you."
Oh,
She's
that's
like,
so
"Oh, it
funny.
wasn't until I saw this girl getting fingered next to me on the couch that I was like, oh, yeah, okay."
Wow. It's very cute, Beth, because that you decided to bring deviled eggs to a sex party. I mean, my wife to this day, not that we go to sex parties, but anytime we go to someone's house, whether it's like to just drop something off, she insists on always bringing something, whether it's like a dessert or some sort of small gift, a plant. So it's very sweet of you to think about that. This would be the perfect time to bring deviled eggs to a sex party. That's
Yeah,
very funny.
I thought that was totally normal and appropriate, and I still stand by that.
Or were they a hit? Did
Um,
people actually eat the deviled eggs?
oh, hell yeah. Although now it will say, 13 whatever years later, when we have food at the parties, we do tend to stay away from certain types of food.
Makes
But,
sense.
it
Yeah.
was my first part, so you can't blame me.
So you mentioned the fact that you came to New York, about a dozen years ago, and it's so funny now looking at, it's so cool how people assimilate to New York so quickly because no one's actually from New York. It's even though there's so many people live there, people come from all over the world, and then all of a sudden they assume like this cloak of a New Yorker. So where did you come from, and what were you expecting to happen when you came to New York? Because people come to New York for many different reasons. Either entertainment, show business, but it's a big finance hub, new change of life. What was your idea behind even going to New York in the first place?
Sure, yeah, I'm from Michigan. I'm from the Metro Detroit area. I went to university in mid-Michigan. I lived in Chicago for a year and a half. I traveled the world for a year and a half. Then I went back to Michigan. Then I'm in Michigan and I'm like, okay, I'm like mid-20s. Like, what's next? I've done Chicago. I'm like, it's New York or LA, right? Like, I'm the sort of person I got to get out there in life and do something. So I just didn't want to stay at home, and I wanted to go find the rest of my life, really. And I didn't know what that was going to entail, but I figured New York or LA, and I was just quite certain that I'm much more oriented for New York than LA. So I just moved to New York looking for opportunity and possibility, and I definitely found it.
And how long were you in New York before you made the deviled eggs? What time span was that from the time you, like,
Three and a
came to New
half
York?
months. Three
How
and a
much?
half months.
3.5 months?
Yep.
Wow. Do you ever sliding doors it and be like, what if I picked LA? Or what if I never decided to make those, deviled eggs and go to that party? Do you
No,
ever think about
I don't tend to think about the past and what could have been different. I usually am thinking about the future and how to make that the best. Um, but if, anything would have been different that would have changed my life, I would have definitely still had an exciting and fun and great life, I'm sure, and met the right people. And I'm sure it would have been just as exciting and fun because I'm not really content otherwise, you know?
so
So
cool. All right, so I'm gonna bring this up, but we don't have to delve too deep into it. But obviously, folks who may have heard the Hacienda may have heard the dark side of it. There have been reports of things going down, and I know you cannot go into details, but uh, what do you say to folks when all they know is these reports that you see in the news, and whether it's assaults or people feeling uncomfortable? Give us that from the inside when you see these reports, and when you run into people when they say, "Oh boy, heard about what's going on in Hacienda. Sounds dangerous." Like, what do you say to that?
I think this is a great opportunity. Thank you for asking me because I have not got to speak about this since what happened this year and what came out this year, this big article, which many people have seen in the New York Times, which was a complete sort of hit piece on Hacienda and tried very, very hard to paint us in this certain light and take us down. And so, I haven't responded to that, but I'd like to. I can talk about things in the broader sense as you asked me, or I can speak to that specific article.
Well, yeah. So
Um,
let's, or for people who haven't read the article, basically someone is alluding to the fact that the founders, you and your husband and your partner Kenneth, um, have that there was turned a blind eye to assaults and mistreatments. Is that the basic gist of the story?
yeah, I mean, Hacienda has been going on as a party and as a community for about 15 years. And this reporter called hundreds of people and tried to find and create a story. And there are undoubtedly negative and harmful things that have happened throughout the years. Um, but we have taken actions for each one of these instances. And we provided her with specific and detailed accounts of what we did in these cases. And our side of the story was completely left out. And it was written in this way that we were neglectful and that we create this environment of harm. And it's just not true. Um, we care deeply about this and we do everything that we can. And now, I'm sure not everybody is always happy with everything. We've had thousands of people come to our parties. And like I said, things do happen. It's not a 100% safe place because nowhere is. We take great strides to make it safe as possible. But things do happen. And when they do happen, we do our absolute best to address it. And I took it as an opportunity to, try to even do better going forward and be open and honest about these things. But it was a real shame the way that we were portrayed, and it was really very unfair. Um, and if people do want to focus on the negative aspects of it, there's only so much I can do, right? I have to do my absolute best. I can convey and communicate what that is to people, and I want them to know what that is. But then at a certain point, if people want to only focus on the negative or, lean into gossip or rumors and focus on painful, instances and kind of perpetuate it and not try to come to an understanding, or then what can I do? So, all I can do is my best. I can keep trying to improve that along the way and then be open about it. And yeah, so I mean, it was really, really difficult year. We were quite harassed by that whole situation, as were other people in our community. It was really very unfair look. And I hated what it, did to the sex positive community overall. It just tried to paint sex parties and all of us as a bunch of horrible degenerates. And like, there's no safe way to do this. I just don't think that's true.
Now, you mentioned the fact how you guys you guys have parameters to keep people safe, and, obviously, the gist of the report was that it was not a safe place. Give us a little context. How do you keep it safe? Because you mentioned anywhere you go that there's a lot of people involved, and especially when sex is involved or, mixing it, whatever, what have you, with other substances, things can happen. So what do you do as a role of the founder, the queen of the Hacienda, as you are called? What do you do to keep it safe for folks?
Yes, we have a lot of awesome things in place. First of all, we're based off of like a referral system. So you do need to know somebody in the community. When you apply, you need to put their name down. And then we reach out to that person and we say, hey, do you vouch for this person as being able to stake their boundaries and understand consent? So we get personal recommendations for most of our incoming members. We also do allow some partners and friends to vouch for each other, and we have a mentorship program as well. But basically, everybody who comes in is being looked at, is applying and being looked at, and has somebody else saying this person's a good person. Then we have a list, a very, good and clear list of rules and policies. The first time that somebody comes to one of our parties, there's an orientation speech that we take them through. They're required to attend. It's about a 10-12 minute talk where we just kind of talk about the rules, the policies. We give some pro tips. It really is a culture that we're trying to not only build, but continue and share. So we need to be really intentional with what are the goals and rules and how do we do things in this culture. So we have the orientation. We also put all the rules in the email. People have to agree to them when they check out to buy their ticket. But people easily agree to anything. So we get them in the room and we talk to them about it. A lot of times after that, we'll like have icebreaker games just to get people practicing verbal consent. We have guardians at parties, so they're wearing like light up armbands, and everybody knows that they can go to these guardians if anything happens. The guardians are also there just to keep an eye on things, make sure that everything's looking good, everybody's happy, everything looks safe. People aren't watching too closely or creepily or something like that. They'll, be proactive about things. Sometimes mistakes happen and people just need the opportunity to learn. So we give them that opportunity, we'll give warnings or something. But usually at that point, people are at the party after the orientation, they're there with a guest or someone vouch for them. By that point, you need to know what's going on. And we do have very few problems, but problems can happen. So people can also report after the fact to a guardian or on an online form if something happened. And then there's a whole process for dealing with that when it does occur. So we do a lot of education on people with people as we welcome them into the community. We don't just like throw them in the deep end. We have them come early. Really, the orientation is a great thing because they come early. They're meeting other new people. Like they're getting comfortable with the space and the rules, what's expected of them. But we're really driving home first and foremost verbal consent for all physical touch, especially in New York. The sex positive. Well, I shouldn't say sex positive, but culture, especially around different sorts of sex in public or as part of a community, it changes all over the world. There's different groups, there's different ways people do things, especially in New York. It's very consent forward and consent first, and verbal consent for all touching, even hugs, everything like that is totally required. So we really drive that home and people understand pretty well. It's a simple concept, but they have to get used to it.
Yeah, and, recently, I remember Bill Maher saying something, the fact that there's nothing politically correct about sex. Like, no matter how you shake it, sex is sex. It's not you really can't be like, "Hey," obviously consent. I'm not talking about consent, but, like, the idea of sex is not politically correct. So, the reason I bring this up is, like, how do you thread sex in this politically correct world and make bureaucracy sexy? Because it sounds like you said, you have these levers in place to make sure people are safe, and then you probably, I'm assuming, have some sort of, lack of a better word, tribunal that decides whether people could come or stay or be excluded from the community. So how do you make that all work? Because the parties, I'm sure for a lot of people can seem like a lot of fun, but there's a lot of layers of bureaucracy to make sure to keep that fun in place. So, so I'm trying to say, it's like, how do you make all this fun and sexy?
It is a fine, delicate balance, and it's not easy. It is not easy. You're balancing the fun and the excitement of sex and partying with the impact and excitement and love and pleasure and harm that sex can create, physical, experiences create for people. So it's certainly not easy. We do it by having all of these systems in place, having a really good and strong core community of people who are volunteers, who are guardians, who are keeping their eyes on things and on situations. And when things come up, yep, there's people who deal with it. And we have discussions and talks and figure out the best way to handle it. It is a fine balance, all of this, and it's certainly not easy, to be honest, because with stuff so important, you have to make decisions, and when you have over 12, 15 years and thousands of people, even if you have a small handful of situations that arise, not everybody's gonna always be happy about how things are handled and maybe not even know how they were handled because of gossip or rumors, whatever. So it's not easy.
So the last thing on this, we'll put a pin in this part of the conversation, but you mentioned this year was rough when the story came out and all these allegations, and then obviously, like you said, most people have a pretty good time there. Going forward into 2025, what now that you're putting 24 behind you, what do you is there anything you could have learned from this past year in terms of you mentioned it was a hit piece, so obviously there was probably some intent there to besmirch you guys, but now that you've gone through this, what do you hope 2025, will shape or form how things look like in the future at the Hacienda?
Absolutely. Great question. And I had to lean on that a lot when this was all happening, not just focus on, oh, this feels unfair and this is not right. How can I be better? How can Hacienda be better because of this? And that is absolutely the way to look at it. This is an opportunity to grow. And so I've been working with two people um, on a project to analyze our current policies, hear from the community about their thoughts and feelings, and look at everything we have in place and see how can we do better. What can we change to be better, to be stronger? How can we change our policies? How can we weave in more education? And this, honestly, this project's been going on for a while because it's like really important and we want to do really a great job at it. So I'm still working on it right now with two really smart and educated people, experts on that. And we will be rolling out more education and updated policies in the new year because we have to listen to people. Even if I felt that there was parts of this that were unfair, if people, express hurt and want change or something, then absolutely, this is a community, and I'm here to listen to that and do better. So I look forward to getting some of those new updates in place and working in 2025.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you discussing that.
Absolutely. I mean,
You've
I'm
always
happy to
been very
talk
open.
about it.
Yeah, you've always been very open. So I just, like I said, I always like to tread lightly when it comes to matters like this.
It's
And speaking,
important, it
yeah,
really is important. So no, I thank you for asking me about it.
and speaking of tender moments, you did mention you have a couple children. You have a couple kids.
I have two kids. Yeah.
Okay,
I have
so I hate
yeah.
asking mother questions because I always feel
That's
a straight
fine.
white
It's a
guy.
part of who I am. I am
Yeah.
a very open person, like you said.
So we've established that you are this queen of the hacienda, a sex positive community where people are having parties, they're getting down and dirty. We to explain the exactly intricacies and nuances that happen there, but you're a mom too. So how do you separate the two? How do your kids fit into knowing what's going down? Because this to me is fascinating. Because again, like I think that probably people who meet you be like, oh yeah, she's the swinging single lady who's having the best life, but you're also a parent. So how does it all fit in? How does that all world work for Beth?
Well, thankfully, I live in a very progressive neighborhood and area of the world in New York City, and it works out just perfectly fine, to be honest. I am married with two kids. I run a sex party and I just opened a brand new nightclub. So I do have quite an interesting life and I love the balance of it all. I get a lot of help with the kids, to be honest. So I'm lucky there. I have a great, strong marriage. I live right next door to this brand new club that I opened, and I live 6 blocks away from the Hacienda. So, and many of my friends live, nearby.
And how old are the kids?
The kids are 2.5 and almost 5.
Okay. So, all right. So they're at the stage of life where again,
They don't know yet. They
they
don't
don't
know
know
yet.
shit.
They know about the bar and the club because I've taken them over there when it's been closed before. So they know about the bar, but no, they don't. Mommy throws parties. I
Well,
mean, they
you're
don't
future
even.
focused, like you mentioned. Let's future focus. Let's go 10 years when these kids are like, "Hey, mom, why you keep going out late that night? You know, I waited to say it till early in the morning." Like, have you prepared yourself for those conversations? I mean, again, you're an open book, so I don't think you'll be hiding anything from them. But there's got to be some sort of nuance to these kinds of conversations. So maybe, and this could be advice for other people that are maybe experiencing the same thing you are, where they have this work-life balance, where they have a family, but they also have this thing or sort of lifestyle they want to live. How would those conversations look like to you in the future?
Well, thankfully, I am really open. Like, I am open about these things because I think that there's nothing wrong with it. And I believe that this is a completely acceptable way to live. And in fact, it's what I've chosen for myself in my life, right? So, my kids, all I can do along the way, I don't worry about what they're going to find out in the future or how I'm going to tell them. I imagine as they get older, I will learn what is appropriate for them to know at that age. I don't know, my kids are only so old, so I don't know exactly how that plays out, but I will as, when they're 7, what is appropriate to know versus, when they're 10. I'll make those decisions along the way, along with my husband. And also, kids just find things out, right? So there's a certain amount of control that you don't have. But I think it's a good idea to be open with your kids to an appropriate degree, right? They don't need to know everything. I don't need to be an open book with them completely, but I'll teach them along the way and figure it out. And really not that worried about it.
And on the subject of generations, um, you've been doing this for well, doing this. You've lived like this for 10 years. So you're seeing this sort of demographic shift where you probably when you got there, it was more the Gen X crowd, and then you start moving into millennials and Gen Z. Is there any differences? Well, we all know there's difference between generations, but do you see like tangible differences in the generations that have walked through the hacienda from, us old timers like Gen Xers, and I'm sure they're probably boomers too. What the hell? They can have some fun without. But do you see differences in the generations as they walk through in the last 10 years?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've been uh, doing this since 20, 2012, 2011, 2012. So yeah, I mean, there's major differences in the overall culture of sex positive culture and of the people who are a part of it. Of course, those two are intricately, the culture is made by the people. There's been big shifts in different waves throughout the years. And that's part of, we've definitely grown a lot throughout the years. There's been several important and different sorts of chapters to Hacienda's history that I've been a part of. At the beginning, the sex positive culture, when we were starting out, in 2012, or even before that, when my husband was doing it a little bit before me, there just was not the same. It was not the same world. There was not a lot of rules, policies, ideas developed about how to keep sex parties safe at all. That, was quite a different world. So things were much more lax. They weren't as developed. They weren't as safe. There wasn't as many, policies and things in place. It was more just kind of like a little bit Wild West. Over the years, things developed. We restarted things in 2013 after, seeing that it was too crazy and the wrong person was in charge. Me and a partner at the time restarted things in 2013 and put a lot of things in place then, like guardians and like having a really good list where everybody who's at that party and several, coming up with actual like good rules and policies. So we did a lot of that then in 2013. then absolutely things even since then have changed many times. In 2018, late 2017, I quit my job and I made it not just a community, but also a business because I could see that there was a real desire for even more intentionality and thoughtfulness and development to happen in this community. So yeah, and the way that people think about gender and sex throughout the years has definitely changed. Um, and we need to change right along with it, uh, while keeping a good balance and trying to create an environment where the most number of people feel like excited, but also safe and welcome. So yeah, there's been a lot throughout the years. It's starting to make me feel a little old.
Well, I think change is sometimes very good, and like you mentioned, it was the Wild West, and it was not safe for people, and now, and ironically, as we've been discussing, you've been trying to make it safe, and then shit still happens. It's a complicated world we're living in, and you just got to do the best you can,
I
right?
mean, shit's gonna always happen, right? Like, you
Yeah.
can never promise that anything to do with anything, especially sex, is safe.
All right, so walk us through for this us old vanilla people, what your parties look like, because I think we all imagine, I think the one thing people immediately jump to is Eyes Wide Shut, like everyone's wearing masks, and there's like gothic, figurines, and there's fires and stuff like that. Walk us through a party and what it looks like for someone when after they've gotten through the initiation and they know what to expect and safety precautions.
Yeah.
But walk us through what a party looks like.
What a typical party. Well, we have a lot of different types of themes, and you've probably chosen to come to a party with a theme that you like, whether, it's something like a bisexual theme, or maybe it's something like a Christmas theme or something, they vary. So you've dressed either in something for the theme or in something that makes you feel sexy, or if you don't know what you're doing, even just something kind of nice that you might wear for a date night. So it's really just like a great, great house party with sex. Sometimes we'll have a DJ or we'll just have a great playlist. The venue that we hosted at is beautiful. So you feel like excited because the environment is nice. People are friendly. They're there to talk and chat and be very sociable. It's a party. We always have nice snacks, charcuterie board. Always got to have good snacks. There's a
Do you still
bar.
make deviled eggs?
No, no, that was just the first time. We've got like one cool thing about the party is we have like a lot of different areas. So we have like, okay, maybe you want to go to the bar and get a drink, something that you brought. Maybe you want to go in the hot tub. Maybe you want to hang out by the fire pit table and the couches and chat. Maybe you want to go dance. So maybe you want to go to one of the bedrooms and see what people are doing, or you want to go down to the downstairs and see what's happening with the whole big sexy room, the playroom. So it's like really a great party in that sense because being a guest at a party sometimes is like work. What do you do with yourself? You gotta talk to people. You gotta do, so you can kind of like meander around, walk around. Oh, I'm gonna go get my photo taken. Oh, I'm gonna go get some snacks. I'm gonna talk to this person. I'm gonna do that. And then sometimes you'll also be like, oh yeah, and like let's have sex too. It's like a good party. We'll have performances. Hopefully you're entertained. That's the goal of a great party, right? You're having fun. You're feeling entertained. You got a lot of options for fun things to do. You're meeting interesting, cool, nice, open people. If you have a good connection, then things can go further if you're both on board. So that's exciting too, right? Like that's a really exciting part of the party that most parties don't really offer. Most parties, even if you get to that ultimate, oh my God, you meet somebody you want to have sex with and you both want to have sex, you have to leave that part, go somewhere else to go have sex. You don't have to leave the party. You can go right to the nice area where it's all, there's other people having sex and you can feel inspired. It's exciting. And then when you're done with that, you can go back to the party.
And talk about personalities, because as a party, you know the term wallflower. You have the type A's who are in a non Hacienda party will just like be chatting it up with people, yakking the whole night. And then there's going to be the people who silently sit in the corner and maybe or stick to like one group of people. Do you have these at these kind of parties, or is everyone basically balls to the walls? Up to an 11. Like, what are the
Now,
personalities
not
like mixing?
everybody is a maximum extrovert. We do still have wallflowers, but when you have people who display that typical wallflower sort of behavior at a sex party, you actually have to be a little bit cautious with that because it can come off as creepy, which isn't really fair necessarily, but it's true. So, especially with guys, if you have a guy who is shy or real introverted, makes it, finds it difficult to strike up conversation, stands there alone. First of all, you can't have your phone out, so you can't look at your phone. So that's one thing. It can come across as the energy can be felt more. It can come across as negative energy. So that's really one of those instances where we'll have one of our guardians go up to the person and make small talk, make sure, kind of temperature gauge them. Are they just shy? Do they need a friend? Maybe introduce them to some people because it is pretty important to have a certain type of to be able to talk to people and to be able to, exist in this space in a way where you feel comfortable and other people feel comfortable. Other people can kind of tell if you don't feel comfortable, then it makes them feel uncomfortable. And so that does need to be balanced a little bit, but there's still a wide variety of people at the parties and we want to make it approachable for, a wide variety of people. But yeah, it does help to be, you know, to initiate conversation, make new friends, like have that sort of outgoing vibe, which isn't always easy. So we like to have interactive things for people to do too. That can help.
Wait, now, so I have to go back a second because you mentioned something about no phones. Is that one of the rules? Like, is there a no phone policy in Hacienda?
Yeah, absolutely. That's like the second thing we hit you with, no phones. It's not just no photos, it's like no phones.
What and so what do people do? Because obviously the phone is connected to everyone's limbs. So is there like a check-in area for phones that are safe? How do you do
Well,
that?
we do have like a co-check area. So I mean, look, think about it. If you a lot of times you're wearing very little or nothing at all as well.
Right.
So not having your phone on you is not so hard. It also really helps you be in the moment and present. And I don't think people missing their phones so much. I mean, it was the whole community that decided this rule was incredibly important. So when you check your coat and your bag and you got your sexy little outfit on, you keep your phone with your stuff too. So if you want to get someone's phone number when you call your car to go home, you stand in the front hallway and you can use your phone then.
Okay, so, I'm trying to think, I is a hacienda sex party the only place in New York where no phones are allowed? I'm trying to think because
A lot
everywhere
of
else
sex parties do this. Most sex parties do
Oh,
this.
okay, alright. You see, I'm a noob. Little do I know that, that's how it is. Alright, so, obviously, the reason with the phones is not just the connection, it's discretion. Um, and I wanna ask this because I always kinda try to weave this in any way I can, but, like, you're in New York. There are a lot of high-profile people living in New York City, whether they're, uh, actors, musicians, artists, government officials. You're not going to name names. I know you will know. But do quote unquote famous people show up at Hacienda for these parties?
Not really. I mean, we've not had like really famous people, to be honest. I mean, really, what's more interesting than that is just the people who do come. There's such a wide variety of jobs and what people are doing because it is New York. And it's so interesting to talk to people. And, a lot of people will tell you just what they do. And there will be people who, have higher profile jobs or make a lot of money right along with people who don't make any money at all, and so I wouldn't say there's been many famous people who come.
What's the most random job of someone who's been at you that you can remember, like when you're
I mean, what
striking?
I find really funny is when we send out the email newsletters and we'll get like an automatic reply from some like big falutin lawyer or something from their work email. And I'm just like, really? Like you didn't create a separate email address for this?
Oh my god. That's like that guy in North Carolina, the lieutenant governor who's running for governor of North Carolina was using his, like, real screen name in, like, adult sites, which is, like so that's hysterical. So you get, like, automatic people using their work emails. Oh my lord, that is hysterical. That's so funny. Alright, so let's wrap this up with some advice. Someone when we pop this on may come up on their YouTube or podcast feed. Um, they want to live a sex positive life, and they don't live in Bushwick, Brooklyn, where it's obviously very, very easy to connect with other folks in the sex positive community. Do you have any advice? Maybe someone back home in Michigan who wants to sort of live that kind of lifestyle. What's some piece of advice you could share for some of those folks?
Get on the internet and start doing some searches. There are communities of people all over the world who, have exciting new ideas about sex and love that you can learn about and tap into. Two of the biggest communities and cultures there are swingers and kink. And even if you're not super aligned with all of the values of either of those communities or super interested in being a swinger or super kinky, you could use those communities as an in to learn about other groups and just to get an in. You start talking to people, look up online what sorts of events there are. I just opened, this new club in New York where we're not hosting sex parties there, but we're having a lot of sexy themed events. And that's a great gateway for people. It's called The House. I'm sure that there's sexy themed events at different bars and clubs all over the place, but you find out what your local communities are, and really everything is you figuring it out over the internet. So just do some searches, look for sex positive communities, kink, swingers, polyamory, whatever sorts of buzzwords, maybe get on Reddit, find out what's nearby. There's something everywhere. Just take the first step and be brave.
Awesome. Her name is Beth Sparksfire. Beth, if people want to find out more about you and Hacienda, where should they start?
Well, we've got a website. We are hacienda.com. Our Instagram is at Hacienda Community. We also have this new nightclub, The House. That is wearethehouse.com. That Instagram is thehouse.nyc. So these are our websites. You can sign up for our newsletter. We have a lot of great events. Maybe if you're looking for something sexy, but you don't live in New York, well, when you come and visit, you can come and visit us and we'll teach you all about it.
Awesome. Beth, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe. It was really fun talking to you.
And that's going to do it for season 2 of Good Listen. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this year. I really appreciate you taking the time and watching or listening. I know there's so much content out there that you could be consuming, so I really appreciate you when you take the time to watch our little show here. So I'm going to be back in 2025 with new episodes, new conversations with amazing people. But in the meantime, make sure you can follow me on social media. You can always connect with me, find out more about me at joepardavila.com. But that's going to do it. I hope you have a great holiday. Your 2024 wraps up well, and I will see you in 2025. Adios.